there's a reason I put all four of these pictures together. And I don't think I'll ask you to guess what my thinking was, because the pictures are quite different. Obviously, they're all portraits of one kind or another. One kind or another refers to a couple of them have the subject looking into the camera. A couple of them are close, even very close. A couple of them have more atmosphere. A couple of them are environmental portraits. A couple of them are studio portraits. But they have one thing that the photographer, and I believe it's two, maybe three photographers. And it, again, for what it's worth, it's not that it doesn't matter who is who, but it doesn't matter for the purpose that I'm doing now. So I realize the three of you whose pictures these are, are thinking about them, and please make comments as I ask certain things. So the pictures are all different in the way I just described. Is there any way in which what the photographer is trying to achieve in these pictures is exactly the same? What is the key thing a photographer looks for in these pictures after the decision of where they are, what the props are, what the environment is, studio or the real world, and even what the angle of the face is? What are each of these pictures looking for as the final piece after those things of a portrait? And almost every portrait this would apply to, this thing that you're looking for. For example, well, just try it. And so any comments from anybody?
Rule of thirds.
Who said that? I can't see you all very well with all
Sorry,
these.
this is Alina. I did not
Hello,
join
thank
the
you.
video.
Fine. Yeah, you didn't light up. What did you say? Rule of thirds?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about what I'm asking. Let me see if I can ask the question more precisely. Okay, so I'm not asking the question technically, how are the pictures structured, whether it's rule of thirds or whatever you might term it, but what is the visual component, the visual piece that is the most important thing in a portrait, or one of the most important things that each of these pictures struggles with. Now, the word struggle doesn't mean it didn't work. It merely means this is the thing the photographer had to work on. And Ilya, your
we
picture,
look for the, oh, sorry.
No,
We look for the emotion.
Okay, who said that?
Me.
I can't see you though. Okay. Oh, you know what? You know what
Yeah,
might
Remy.
work? Yeah, hello, Ravi. Just say your name when you say it, because you're at the very corner of my screen, because all I see is I have a very, very large screen and 95% of it is with the pictures. Okay, so
Rahul here. All of these pictures are transient emotions. The emotions is not locked in yet. Photographer was trying to capture an emotion, and these clicks seems to be just before or just after that perfect emotion that photographer was aiming
okay,
for.
so actually there's a lot you said. So you and Remy said something similar, the word emotion. So what's a more generic term for seeing the emotion in a face? This, you all know this. I just want to see if I can bring it out. What?
Expression.
Of course, yeah. So each of these pictures attempts to bring out expression of a certain kind, whatever that might be. And the goal of the expression is what Rahul was talking about, which is to bring out perhaps some kind of emotion, some kind of connection with the viewer, even if the face is off camera, for example, in this one. So the expression is the key to these pictures. After the things that I mentioned first, the structural things, where they are, whether they're studio or in the real world, the angle of the head, how far away they are, all those things can contribute to the way the picture looks, of course. And in some ways, they can contribute to the impression that the expression makes. But the expression in the face is I'm calling it the final element, which is crucial in the picture. There's many other elements in these pictures that we can talk about. Now, let's look at the expressions critically, which means in detail. So I'm going to just go through each one of these four pictures. I'm going to do it because it's just four pictures. So what somebody hinted at, I think it was you, Rahul. You said that the photographer captured the expression when? Say, can you remember what you said?
Yeah, just before or just after perfect moment, or what would have been the perfect picture. Like in this picture, I think still the Leah-2 picture, that picture still can be in my book, obviously, can be taken out for the rest of the group. In here, I believe the lady was in between saying something or expressing something. If you would go to the third picture, yeah, in here, the model was, she looked back about what's going on in the house, but she did not have completed the expression over there. And in the next picture, the model clearly, I mean, I should have taken the picture before that where she was like completely leaning into that motion. But when she finished that motion and she looked at the camera and, I clicked the thing. So this is the shot where it was taken after the perfect motion. The thing about was taken before that perfect expression. I think Leah-2 is still a serene child expression. And this one, I'm not exactly sure either. It was before, it could be later, but the photographer can say something. The first one.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So what's our definition of the perfect expression? So let's talk a little about that. So there, in some ways, there is no such thing as a perfect expression. Expression is expression. But there is, and there are elements of expression that look a certain way and may have been captured at a moment. I wouldn't use the word perfect, but at a moment that might be awkward, might be confusing, might be, I'm sorry, say that again?
No, I got it. I got exactly what you're trying to say.
Yeah. Might be extreme. There's lots of different ways to define expression. Now let's look at one. Let's look at just two of these, and you'll be interested in this. Let me go back to the beginning. Let's look at just two of them. Oh, whoop, wrong two. Sorry. Okay, these two, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now these two pictures are utterly different in content, distance, structure, environment, angle, whether the person is looking in the camera or not. They couldn't be more different, but both of them have rather purposeful, I would call it, expressions. One of these expressions, if I were to make a value judgment, one of them is extremely evocative, which means I can look at it and I can choose to make an interpretation. Each of us could make a different interpretation, but the structure of the picture allows us to make that judgment. We can all make it for ourselves. And it has to do with a lot of different elements in the way the person looks. One of them is out and out awkward looking. And we'll talk about why. Now, anybody have any comment of which is which? Which is the awkward look? Just expression at this stage. Which is the awkward one, and which is the one that has an expression which is meaningful in the sense that each of us can interpret it in a very evocative way, whereas the other one, the expression is simply awkward. Any comment?
The lady with the red dress is awkward, and the first one is evocative.
Anybody else? I'm just interested in your opinions.
This is Kathleen. I agree. The lady in the red is awkward. The expression.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Ilya. I agree as well.
Yeah, that's the case. So I often start with ones that are straightforward, in terms of the class. So this picture is extremely, well, I call it evocative. We can call it anything we want. Any of you can call it what you want and choose to interpret it any way you want, but it is most certainly not awkward. Now, describing awkward is also in the eye of the beholder. We'll talk about the other one in a minute, but look at this one. Look at all of the elements. This is that deconstruction piece. So what are the elements in this picture, in this expression really, that give it a whole dimension that allows you to see it as extremely evocative, which means, to me at least, it means it has a lot of meaning in it. You can interpret it as somebody talking. You can interpret it as somebody looking at something intensely. You could even interpret it as somebody who is just moved and is making a gesture that we can't see. You see how the hair is kind of out here? I don't know if it's from wind or from movement. It doesn't matter. But this picture has these things I just described. It has, look at the cheekbones. See how they're a little puffy? What does that reveal visually? I call it energy. It reveals that something was talking, going on. There's a hint of movement. It's not placid or neutral. Now, bear with me. I'm getting a little feedback from somebody, so be careful with your. Rahul, why don't you mute yourself? Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, I muted, yeah, I think that'll fix it for the moment. And unmute if you want to talk. It's as simple as that. I'm not
David?
gonna, yeah, please, go ahead.
So to me, this one, they've isolated her from the
Of
background.
course, yeah.
And they've got wonderful space in front of her. It to me has a very photojournalistic appeal to it.
Let's talk about that. And I hadn't gotten to that, but we might as well talk about it. So you brought it up. Now, again, most of you know these things from your own experience. Is what does Kathleen mean when she says that the face is isolated? Now, we're no longer talking about just the expression. I was in the process of talking about the cheekbones, the mouth, the sparkle in the eyes, which is caused by the light, even, I'll add in just for the hell of it, the sheen in the hair and the movement here and the furrowed brow, all of those things, even the eyebrows, those all contribute to what I'm calling expression. Now, Kathleen's talked about something completely different, which is how the figure, the face, with all those expressive elements, is isolated from the background. What causes that?
The depth of field.
The negative.
Yeah, of course. And I can see on the data here, it's gone. But can anybody guess what aperture this might be and what focal length lens? Not a zoom, if it's a zoom lens, what focal length is it set at? Any guesses?
Focal length 85 plus, aperture depends on the distance and the lens compression, but definitely around f2 to f4.
You got it. F2 to F4. And the reason that's the case, of course, is that she is really isolated. It's probably closer to F4 because notice that the cheek and a little further back here, just at the edge of the furrowed brow, those are slight differences, but they're needle sharp. And with a telephoto, even an 85 millimeter lens, it can be an issue with control of depth of field. At F2, you might get just this little chunk sharp, whereas here we have it sharp here. So it's slightly smaller aperture, say F4. Okay, and then all of this blurry blobby stuff is generated by the way this type of lens controls depth of field, really sees depth of field, sees the distance relationship in a visual way. Okay.
Well, this was done at 95 millimeters at 2.8.
Yeah, so that's all the
cool.
guessing. Yeah. So by the way, just for what it's worth, most of my pictures, just from experience, and as you gain experience, you can deduce, and I can deduce in other people's pictures, what the most likely effective focal length is for 35 millimeter cameras and the likely aperture just by looking at the way the compression is and of course the actual focus that we see. So that's a matter of experience. So this to anybody who's looked at these kinds of pictures would say it's an 85-ish millimeter lens, a short portrait lens, almost wide open. That would be the way to summarize it. And that, of course, is what isolates the face. So you can see what's going on with this picture. There's the expression we've been talking about. There's the isolation of the face. There's the beautiful sheen of the light on her really probably very dark hair, but because of the light, it picks it up in a sheen way. So it creates, by picking up the sheen, what do we end up seeing? What's the generic word for what we see in her hair? Is detail, of course, right? So we see lots of things going on. We even see a soft kind of detail. Look at the little areas of tremendous detail in her skin. All of this has to do with the way the light is. Now, there's one other very, very big factor in this picture. We've only talked about expression and then some other general things about the picture itself. And as I say, none of these are any big mystery, but it's a matter of thinking about your pictures with some of this vocabulary and this sense of looking deeply into the way the image is. But there's one other crucial thing in this picture, which helps isolate the face, and it's a different way, and draws you into the face at the same time. There's actually two things. So can anybody comment, what are the two things in this picture that we haven't talked about?
The catch lights in their eyes.
I indirectly talked about that already by talking about the quality of the light. So you see how the eyes really pop out. Okay, I'm getting a little feedback, which is okay. It's not terrible.
Direction
Anybody else?
of her gaze, which is separating it out from the background. It's dragging the attention away from the background, separating it, isolating it.
Now, what is separated from the background? Say that again. I didn't understand what you were
Gaze.
referring to.
Gaze or the direction the model is looking at.
Sure. But what might be much, much, much more important, the very structure of the picture. There's something we haven't talked about. There's two things we haven't talked about at all in terms of the visual aspects of the picture, having to do with composition, toning, light, and a few other things. But what are they? If you were to look at this picture, what is after the expression, after the light, what are two other things which are crucial to making this picture what it is?
Is it a negative space? This is Alina.
Where negative space?
Whatever she's looking at, to me, that was negative space. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not saying you're right or wrong. I'm just trying to understand what you said. So don't worry about what she's looking at. I suggest look at what we see, just what we see. So in other words, don't try to imagine something that we don't see, which you may be right. So just based on what we see, there's two immense things we haven't talked about. See, in a simple picture, this starts to get more complicated to deconstruct it.
Well, there is a large amount of space on the left.
Okay, and what about that space? You're on the right track.
It gives her a place to move to.
Maybe. Again, talk about what we actually see, not what you imagine would be possible, which is perfectly valid, but what do we actually see? You'll get it when I tell you what I'm at least thinking about. So what do we actually see? This is very straightforward. All of you see this, but the vocabulary of how we talk about it is crucial. So again, the question is, there are two major things which are straightforward in this picture. In other words, we can see them. We don't have to imagine them or project them.
Is it the
go ahead.
color? The very, very green versus the skin tone and the hair tone?
Absolutely. The green, it's not only the contrast, it's the mere presence of the green blobs is stunning. It's absolutely stunning. And of course, the contrast is in and of itself very interesting between all of this green stuff and the black, and then the black hair, and then the tone of the hair, and then the tone of the skin. So this huge area of green blobs is color. Imagine if it was white, just for the sake of argument, or brown. It would still be an interesting picture, but it wouldn't have this additional layer of color. So you see where I'm going with this? I'm trying to point out that those blobby greens are generated by the real color that was there, of course. And what else? What else?
Okay, so I think the amount of space on the left is important because of the strength of her emotion.
Okay,
So
we didn't get
has room to travel, so to speak.
Okay, we didn't get to that yet. We'll get to that. That's the second thing. The first thing is just the color.
It's the depth
Okay.
of field that's causing you to
Right.
blow out all that back, or not blow
Right.
out, blur out that background.
Blur out, yeah, and create those blobs of color. So you see what I'm getting at here is that the depth of field isolates her, but it also does an incredible additional task of changing the focus or controlling the focus in the far background and ultimately creating those blobs of color, because it was a green color, which adds incredibly to the picture. Okay, so this is something that's not the first thing you see, but it goes to the overall effect of the picture. And that's the point of why I'm spending so much time on this picture, is because buried in what really is just a close-up of a face from the side is a lot of stuff that we can see. Now, I think it was Ilya, you were commenting about something else. So start that again.
Wait, can I go one?
Or Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, can I go one? I think it's also the fact that it isn't just a solid green. It's this like bokeh effect of the green versus, because you had mentioned what if it was white and it would still be good. I think same thing. If it was just a solid green, it would be still an interesting photo. But I think the fact that it's this bokeh effect and the blobby effect really
I call
adds.
blobby, yeah, absolutely. That's the crucial place for it, I think. So the color is one thing, which is magnificent, but the depth of field generates what you just call bokeh, which is a word I've never heard related to this, but I understand what you mean. So that's what makes this picture. And if it were a solid color, it would be still pretty, but it would lack something from what we actually see here.
Mhm. So there is also like a little kind of reddish, circle towards the top portion of the
Right, it's all the
background,
same.
which is kind of, I think, important because it kind of breaks up the monotony. It kind of is closer to her skin tone.
You could make a case for that, and that would be of secondary interest, I suppose. Even this dark area, which isn't too big, works
Mhm.
very well. It's just a shape. But somebody was talking about her position, I believe.
Yeah, I was talking about her position, right?
What about her position?
So basically, the amount of the space on the left needs to be large in order to give her space to convey her emotion. So it's kind of, so if like, because if it were less of an emotional portrait, maybe, so it wouldn't work so well.
Okay, so what you've done, all that you just said, I would agree with, except for one aspect. So what you've done is you've made a judgment, which you as the viewer of the picture, you can make any judgment you want. You're saying it gives her space to look out, or it doesn't even really matter how I'm trying to reconstruct what you said. But what you didn't say is just what we see. You suggested that it gives her space to do something. But what is it that the space actually does is it shifts her to the right, and here's the key piece. It frames her here. It chops her head off on purpose because there's lots more head there. We can easily know that. But by drawing the composition in so tight, it frames her. So you have this incredible framing effect with this beautiful detailed hair. She's looking wherever she's looking, and however you would interpret what she's doing or will do or hasn't done or has just finished doing, we don't know that, but you can choose to guess at it based on the composition and the structure of the picture. So this picture is very successful in putting so many pieces together, and we've only hinted at the quality of the light, which is soft and bright. I mentioned the bringing out of all the detail. Now, this one has some fabulous aspects, but we were talking just about expression. So why is this expression awkward? What is it in the face visually that gives you the feeling of it being awkward? Anybody but the photographer comment.
To me, the face doesn't seem to match the motion that we're seeing in the dress. And I don't know exactly what it is it doesn't match, but it just feels like there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, see, this is a hard one to define because you're right. I can get a little closer to specifically describing things, but it's mostly the feeling seems awkward, the feeling in her face. So we're calling it awkward. Whereas the motion and all of this going on here, you can tell that it has a lot of energy, a lot of sparkle to it. That's a value judgment. And yet she looks like she's caught at a moment when she's completely, I can only continue to use the term awkward. So how do you fix that? If you're taking this kind of picture and you're dealing with a lot of elements, you're dealing with the light is all set up, she's in a neutral background, but you're having her twirl that stuff around on purpose. I mean the fabric. So she's moving it and doing all these kinds of things to it. So this is a hard question, actually. I've done this kind of picture many times commercially. And the problem is integrating all the pieces, the movement, the body language, the lighting, and the expression. How do you put all of those together and avoid some of them being awkward, some of them being incomplete, some of them not working visually? What do you have to do? What's the process? Any comments?
Photographer should pick less awkward picture, one of the 700, than picking up this picture for the critics.
Okay, I know you're the one who said, so it could be an editing issue, but when you're actually out there shooting it, what are you doing in order to integrate all of these pieces? First of all, you have to recognize there are all of these pieces, because a lot of people will do this kind of picture thinking it's all about the movement of the fabric and stuff after you've done the lighting and put this person in a neutral situation. So how do
Well,
you integrate all of this?
I think maybe like the problem was that the model was a bit too tense. And so maybe, you know, just making her relax, you know, a bit.
Okay, that's too general. Of course, you're on the right track, but what do you do? What are you looking for visually by getting them to relax more? What are you trying to do? So what do you do?
I think that she, as a face and her upper torso, she doesn't have a shadows, and makes this kind of flat. The face and the upper body is very flat looking, because it's kind of like too lit up. It's not, the light should go more from the side.
Well, it is from the side, because you can see the shadow that there's
I
right
know,
here.
but he has to have, yeah, but it's like really is letting up so much. It's not giving the little harsh shadow on her nose. I mean, after the nose makes you that light is, but it's not the. It's making like the face flat. It's too much.
That's true. So here's my response to that: is what you say is 100% true. But even with different lighting, it would still be an awkward expression. So the photographer has left out the most important pieces. I could accept this light. That's a choice, you know, however you want to light it. But it still has to integrate the face, the torso, the movement, the legs, the hands. Now that's a big hint as to what the photographer has to do. What is the photographer looking for? So who took this picture? This is who
Rahul.
Okay, so Raul, what were you looking for in the picture? We'll back into what's needed to be done.
So this is what was happening in that shoot. We wanted to capture the motion of it, but the light and the power setting off of it, and I needed right amount of power at T1.0.1. And what was happening is I was getting 3 separate shots. Either I was getting the movement of the dress perfectly, or I was getting the expression perfectly, or if the expression and movement was coming, then the photo wasn't coming sharp because of the light flash. And I'm the kind of cheapo light, so to speak, and I'm like, can't complain about them. They're giving me enough things what I want. I just have like 700 picture of these. I just need to pick the right sequence. But and this particular thing kind of went a little bit off the planned shoot. So what ended up happening is that the shoot was intended to be what the picture was capturing in the second. So I wanted to shoot a cultural theme. And before I shoot cultural theme, I wanted to capture the model's comfort in a particular dress. So I would see model in her comfortable dress against the model in a specific cultural dress. But this model, she was like so radiant of energy. She just went off, and I couldn't stop clicking the pictures. And because it was like off the script candid moment that I just ended up capturing, I was like kind of unprepared for all of these things, and the calculations were missing for the power and stuff like that when the moment come to it. But yeah, I mean, there is little bit Photoshop work need to be done on her padding and the dress that is showing up, the ground and everything. I couldn't get the editing done completely. To be honest with you, I did not select the photo properly. I was rushed into it in the morning.
Okay, so
but,
let me back up a little bit. Okay, so all the details you just gave me, essentially the backstory about what you did what you did physically. You had this light and that light and the dress and the model and da. That is hard to separate for you because you're the photographer from what I was asking. What I was asking in this situation, which is clearly reasonably successful technically, apart from perhaps You can make a case the light's a little bright and harsh on her face, but I personally don't have any particular problem with that. But technically, it looks completely done. She moves, the flash freezes the movement, freezes her arm if you want it frozen, and it's doing that successfully. But you didn't put together what you had in front of you. So I'm going to try to vastly simplify what you just said. So here's what's going on. You have a situation, whether you stumbled into it on purpose or not, but you have a situation where the lighting freezes the motion. The composition allows you to see all of the motion. It's the right kind of dress because it billows and moves and da-da-da and all this. You have a model who you've lit in a certain way, and you can see the musculature and the hair, and then ultimately the expression. Here's how you take this kind of picture. So once you realize you have these pieces all together and drop all the other very long details of what you were trying to achieve with this model and a different model perhaps, and different costumes, just working with what I see, what you have here, the way to do this, it does have to do with taking a lot of pictures, but it also has to do with maneuvering the model so that all of the pieces are there for you to photograph. And here's what I mean. So the piece that was here for you to photograph was the movement here. So she moved, but her movement is not integrated with the rest of her body. So the arms are actually very awkward too. They're just kind of plop there. Her face is disconnected. Now I can talk about it more intelligently. The reason the face is awkward is it's disconnected visually from what you would guess would be the movement here. So when you work with a model like this, which again, for what it's worth, I've done zillions of times, is you have them kind of do much more effusively. All of it has to be integrated. It's one piece. So you don't look just for the movement of the outfit, which sounded like was one of the things that was very important to you. Of course, it is important, but you got to put all the pieces together. You got to have the musculature and the body language and the bit of movement and the face and the hair, for all you know, flying around. So this requires a lot of shooting, but it requires intelligent shooting, trying to put it all together and ignoring all the other things you were trying to achieve. So it's very, very difficult. That's what I wanted you to see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would summarize it as not bad for the first attempt, lesson learned, and I have good notes as a preparation for the next shoot that is coming up.
You're 100% right. This is not bad for what you're calling the first try. Why? Because actually I like the hand, I like the movement. The body language could be much more intense. You could see a little more musculature at the moment if her arm were bent a little bit. Endless possibilities. So that's a good first try. And you may have gotten better in the outtakes, you know, the hundreds of other outtakes. But to do this kind of shoot requires dropping all of those long lists of things that you were bringing to the picture and just focusing in on what you have in front of you. This is very hard. I'm not suggesting that's easy. Okay, now let's go. Let me go back to one thing here. Give me a second. Okay, let's look at this one. Now, this was the other one I wanted to talk about. Now, Ilya, we talked about, I believe, some of your pictures the last time talking about expression. Am I correct? Okay, so
yes.
Is this a new one or is this an old one? Or
That's like from November 2020.
It doesn't matter. I was just wondering.
Okay. So
what do you think about this picture based on what we've just talked about and what we talked about the last session? What do you think?
Well, the last session, you know, so we talked about, I think it was quite different, but so like this is kind of this, you know, pensive lyrical mood, you know, so which I really liked. And I think kind of the softness of, you know, the of her hair, you know, so over her cheeks, you know, so it also kind of fits in with that. So, and I mean, so I know the background is not perfect, you know, so it's just.
Oh, the background's terrific. Now you specifically asked me, I remember it was you the last time, reminded me to give you specific directions of how to change a picture to improve it. I think that was you, if I don't if I remember. So you use the term pensive. Again, that's the way you choose to interpret the way she looks, which is entirely up to you. Any of us can make any kind of judgment value of what she looks like. But look at the eyes. What is there in the eyes? What could change in the eyes? Ilya, do you think?
So we could see more of the eyes.
Yes. So if this eye were just opened a little bit,
Mhm.
the way it looks now, she looks almost pained. And again, it has elements of being awkward, not as awkward as the expression in the picture we just looked at, but it doesn't put all the same pieces together that we were just talking about. The atmosphere is perfect. Fine, you could stick her anywhere you want. The hair is marvelous, splaying over her face and all of that kind of stuff. But it's the eyes. The cheeks have that kind of, bubble in them, which gives a sense of energy. But the eyes are just a little too close. And see how awkward this one looks? It's kind of drifting around. If the eyes were just open a little bit more, you'd have more of, you could choose to interpret as pensive. So it's partially just shooting so at more to get just these very slight changes. So here's my guess of how all of us photograph this kind of thing. You see somebody, this happens to be your child, I realize, and you take the picture and you're imagining that you caught that person in a pensive mood. But now that I, as a third party, look at the picture, I see these things that it's a little awkward. You can interpret it as pensive, but it doesn't have an impact. It has a sense of being a little awkward in the same way that the other picture that we just looked at was a little awkward. So this again is a matter of shooting more and more and more of the same person and see what you can draw out of them that maybe isn't anything that's even preconceived. So that would be my suggestion, is simply to do more of this person, not exactly in this position, but just to see what variety you get and see if you put together all the pieces in a single image of hair and situation and eyes and expression and what I'm still calling body language with the cheeks. It's very tricky. So that's what I would work on.
Okay, thank you, David.
You're welcome.
So if I can ask, I would like to get your info how I can make better the pictures too. Just to, Okay. Just.
I did with you in great detail. And here's what I'm getting at. So with this picture, is this yours, Remy? No.
No.
No, I'm sorry. In your picture, which was this one, right?
Yeah.
This one's just perfect. This one's great.
Okay.
So and I tried to tell you why. So what do you learn? That's this, in some ways, it's an appropriate question to talk about, because this picture had pieces that really, for me, fit together. All those pieces of person, expression, situation, lighting, composition, all seem to fit together. Very, very evocatively, that was the word I used. So after our long discussion about this, again, it's the same problem. Any pictures you do in the future, you try to put together in this way. So if I were going to suggest something for you to do, I would take somebody completely different and see what you come up with. Take them somewhere completely different, even inside, and see what happens and have them look in the camera. Completely different approach, which I suspect you've done over time, but do it with somebody new. That would be what I would suggest. Because this picture is very successful.
I just want to thank you,
Me.
because I choose that photo because our last critique actually.
Oh.
So this was actually I learned how to look for the better pictures.
Yeah, this is
because I have
very
the
effective.
Beautiful pictures of her when she is smiling and dancing and jumping and reveal more body and stuff like this. But I decided that's from what I learned from your last critique. This would be the picture for it.
Well, that's terrific. That's an editing skill, learning what works. And that's really what we've just finished talking about in many ways.
So I just want to